I came here in 1966 to teach art, and then got married and pulled a 14-foot Shasta travel trailer to Haines, Alaska to teach school.
Oh, wow.
And so taught school in Haines for for a year. And then in 1976, I had a goal to make a trip around the world, which I did, and flew from Tokyo to Anchorage and hitchhiked across Alaska in April with my former wife, and we visited this school in Haines where we taught. Haines, Alaska is the eagle capital of the world, and when you would drive up the Elcan, both sides of the Elcan are lined with eagles. And so that was, and I still am in touch with some friends I made there. I had a goal to make a trip around the world by the time I was 33, and I did that without any way to check my blood sugar, which diabetes has been such a major factor in my life. If it hadn't been for diabetes, I wouldn't be doing this trail, because I was an art teacher. And then in 1980, I started losing my vision, and because of diabetic retinopathy, the leading cause of blindness. And so then, I had spent time, I had spent some time in Iceland, and there they have rerouted roads because of the elementals, the little people. And I spent a lot of time in Denmark, and there the older folks have sincere beliefs in the Nissa, the little people, and there are legends of little people in all the indigenous cultures. And so this is such a beautiful woods. I mean, it's just breathtaking. And I thought, well, I could no longer teach, and I had to come up with some way to make a living. And I thought, well, I'll have a nature trail here, and we'll go out looking for signs of the little people. Now they say the Nissa are nocturnal, and so I've never seen a gnome, but I've had a great time looking for them. And a lot of kids tell me they see gnomes and fairies, which I think is pretty neat. And I'm a big believer in there are legends of little people to foster imagination with children, and it does work.
Where did you first get your connection with gnomes? Was it in Iceland and Northern Europe?
It was, okay. Yeah, and I really knew nothing about them, and I had a cousin, Josephine, who lives in Sacramento now, and she had married a Dane, Ole, and so we went to visit them in 1976 when we were doing this extensive trip. And so I just got caught up with this idea of elementals, and it was sort of fun. And yeah.
Can you explain to me what it is you do here?
Well, I've got a Norway spruce tree down here that's 120 feet tall, and I read that John Muir had climbed a 100-foot spruce tree in a windstorm, and I knew the moment I read that I was climbing that tree in a windstorm. So I got up to where the tree is about 1.5 inches thick and talked about feeling a oneness with the tree, because that's what he wanted to experience, that oneness.
Well, you host tours, right?
Yes, that's what I do, which I've been doing now for 39 years. Let me show you here. This is exactly what I do. When Yeah, if you ever want to come down for a trail, I would love to do it with you. It's just so much fun. But everybody comes. I love to hear children laugh. And I was sitting on the porch thinking, well, I wonder if they're laughing at me or with me. But it really doesn't make any difference because I love to hear kids laugh. And so I'll go up and meet them on the bus, and I'll be wearing these silly oversized sunglasses, and usually quite a few of them will laugh. And so then I have this conch shell that I blow, and everybody comes in here, and they're all sitting here. I've got this very severe macular degeneration, so I really can't see you. I mean, even with these glasses on, I can't see anybody. I mean, it's very difficult. I mean, I could have been blind when I was 37, so I'll never complain about this. But I can no longer drive, I can't read. I get talking books, which I love. Okay, so it takes me a long time to get around to things. But
That's okay.
Everybody comes in and they sit down. And so I did some dramatics when I was younger. I liked plays, and so everybody's here. And I've had as many as 70 first graders in this room.
In here?
In here.
Oh my goodness.
I don't want to do it again. But, so everybody's sitting here, and I sort of fool around with these glasses and go, whoa, look at these human beings. You know, of course, each of us is a human being. We come in different sizes, we come in different shapes, we come in different colors, and we come with different thoughts in our minds. And that, of course, is what makes us human beings. Just because somebody isn't the same color as you makes no difference at all. Just because somebody thinks differently than you, that's pretty exciting, because if we all thought the same way, it would be a very dull world in which we live together as human beings. So something I've learned in the years that it's taken for my hair to turn white and my beard to turn white and my mustache to turn white is that the word respect is so important. And I found the kids, and I talk about respect, and boy, you know, I'll do 50, 60 kids at a time, and they have been so respectful. And I taught art, and I love teaching. I've worked with children all my life. I directed the oldest camp in the world for children living with diabetes. That's about 30 miles east of Cleveland. And when I was 65, I walked home from there. It was a 380-mile walk. I slept out at night, raised $7,000 for the camp. And in 2 years, it'll be the 100th anniversary of the creation of insulin by Canadian doctors Banting and Best. Do you know what my life expectancy would have been before insulin?
No.
Anybody have a guess? Well, what would my life expectancy have been before insulin? On a starvation diet, 3 years. And I was 14 when I contracted diabetes, so my life expectancy would have, on a starvation diet, I would have passed away when I was 17. And anyway, that has been a big, big factor in my life, and I've been a really pretty terrible risk taker. I've taken a lot of chances in my life, and but I'm here talking with you, so that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
We bought this this house that was 237 years old, and then it burned to the ground 5 years ago, and we lost everything. And so quite a few years ago, when I was driving, and we were building the house. I'll show you the house. It's this new house I love. But I was just saying to my son yesterday that I don't think I had an appropriate grieving time for losing my old house, which was 237 years old. And I had 37 years of my life in that house, and it completely burned to the ground 5 years ago. And I was at a friend's, and so Katerina and I came walking down Bridle Path Road. There was a foot of snow on the ground, and there was one fire company down here, but they had to park out on Bartville Road, and they ran a hose down here, and so a lot of the kids who are now grown had been here when they were kids, and yeah, Mr. Humphreys, we remember being here when we were a kid. But yeah, it was pretty crazy. But then, so the question is, well, I had this experience in Iceland and in Denmark, and I was captivated with the idea of little people, and I just liked it, and so I decided to have this nature trail here called the place Gnome Countryside, and 95% of my friends told me I was crazy. The idea would never work, and I guess that's a good. Yeah, it's the glasses. But 3 years later, I was seeing. So that would have been 1983. I was seeing about 6,000 people a year here.
Wow.
And I still see quite a few people. Yeah. And
how do you work through your vision impairment and still do the tours, and it's got to be hard.
Well, a big part of my life has been forcing myself to do things, and before there was any way to check blood sugar, I would go in to teach school, and my blood sugars were probably 400 or 500, and I just literally pushed myself through the day, and I've gotten a lot of exercise. And I would come home, and usually when I had days like that, I was so exhausted, I just have to come home and go to bed. But then these test kits became available. Are you familiar with them?
Yeah, like the little.
Yeah.
Pricks.
So in 5 seconds, I know what my blood sugar is. And so, of course, this morning I got up, and my blood sugar was, I think it was like 93. Which is good, and so it's constantly ongoing. And I would always say to the parents of the kids at camp, it would be so wonderful to have 1 week off, that you don't have to do this, because it is ongoing every day of one's life. And, yep. So. Okay, I probably didn't answer a question that you had asked me.
That's okay. I came up with a ton of questions, and then they all just kind of went away listening to you talk anyway.
Well,
how big is the trail?
It's a half-mile long, and we'll have to walk a little bit of it, and because it's been such a big part of my life. I love doing outdoor work, and now it's gotten pretty difficult. And the Gnome Book, have you all seen the Gnome Book?
I think everyone's seen that Gnome Book at some time in their life.
And the Gnome Book says when gnomes have children, they always have twins, a girl and a boy. And back in 1983, my wife at the time had twins, a girl and a boy, and somebody called it into the Lancaster paper, and there was a really cute write-up. I had boxes and boxes of magazine articles and things that were written, and then when the house burned, all those things burned, lost everything. And I thought all the things for the trail, I was sure they were in the house, and here they were up in the gnomery, this little room we call the gnomery. And
Maybe they were rescued from the house.
yeah, I think you know, I had a couple incidents like that. I'm a big believer in there are no coincidences. I'm a firm believer in things happen for a purpose, and that's been my life. I show you this. I do show a couple pictures here, but this book was illustrated by Rien Poortvliet, a Dutch artist, and so this is a gnome skeleton. You see, in proportion, the head is, the skull is much larger than a human skull, and we understand that gnomes are 7 times as intelligent as human beings, and I believe that that's probably why they're so interested in the natural world, unlike so many English people, because it is so, our natural world is such a gift for all of us. And then we have a geographic map of where you find gnomes. And of course, here in the European and Far Eastern countries, lots of red areas. But here in North America and Canada, very few red areas, although right here in Lancaster County, there's a large area of red, indicating possibly lots of gnomes. And have you heard of the, or have you read the Four Agreements? Have any of you read? Oh, life-changing book. And I talk about it a lot. The first agreement is be impeccable with your speech. And I wasn't sure what that word meant exactly, so I Googled it. And impeccable means without sin. And I found that intriguing. And so I've always been guarded with my speech. I would never say to kids, you know, you go out in the woods, you're going to find some gnomes. But I would say, you know, it's fun to imagine if you're out walking around at night. They say gnomes are nocturnal, and you might see some signs indicating possibly some gnomes around. And oh, it's so great the way kids lose themselves. I firmly believe that this idea of little people has come about to foster imagination in children. And boy, it works. Kids just lose themselves. And so anyway, then of course there's the Gnome pop-up book. And on the first page it shows us that gnomes make their homes underground, under trees. So you would be seeing the roots of the tree. And then we have some gnome furniture. And first of all, we have the gnome dowry chest. And in the chest are presents for each of you. So before you leave today, I will be giving each of you a present that's contained in the dowry chest. And keeping in mind, gnomes would be friends of nearly all woodland critters. We understand that they'll have a little rodent called a mole. And in our surroundings here, we have lots of these moles. These moles have been traced to tunneling underground in one evening, the length of a football field, about 300 feet. And if you have moles, you won't have skunks, because moles and skunks eat the same grub worms. And we have a big, well, Riley likes to chase everything. And I'm glad that we have moles and not skunks, because it's no fun cleaning up a dog that's tangled with a skunk. And then I got all these wonderful fun things. A few years ago, there was a group of children from Unionville here, and the teachers brought me this. Real men wear lederhosen. And of course, these are lederhosen worn by men and women in Austria, Germany, and Switzerland. And then 5 years ago, my daughter Courtney was up at my daughter-in-law's across the road here. And Courtney comes running down to the house. She said, Dad, you got to see these leggings. They would look so good under your lederhosen. So I went up and I thought, well, they would look pretty good. So now I have to make up one of these signs: real men wear LuLaRoes. Oh boy. So anyway, we have this, somebody had brought this, a little jacket, and there's a poem here: all that was left of the man I did see was this wee little jacket hung up on a tree. His song lingered still, but the gnome, he did flee. Perhaps if I wait, he'll come looking for me. Fun to think about that. And there's a playground on the trail, and the kids have free time. So, and it's probably one of my favorite parts of the trail, because they get to explore, and they get to build gnome houses, and they get to stack rocks, which I love doing. And so then we have this picture by Courtney when she was in second grade. And Courtney has a shiny red nose, and Courtney wrote, if I had a shiny red nose, I would be so embarrassed I would put Band-Aids all over it. But one day, my dad would probably say, since you have such a nose so bright, you can guide my trail tonight. I would be so happy, by Courtney. And I say to everybody that I love what Courtney wrote, because she took something that was uncomfortable in her life and turned it into something positive. It was something negative, this shiny red nose, and turned it into something positive. And anytime we, as human beings, can take something that's negative in our lives and turn it into something positive, we're giving a gift of love to everybody who loves us. And Courtney's she's a guidance counselor at Kennett Square, and she does a lot of mindfulness work and works with a lot of kindergarten children. And this was a picture of me when I was 6 years old. And then when I was 6, my dad passed away. He was an alcoholic, and I do say this to everybody. My dad was addicted to alcohol and tobacco. And so one thing I learned, I would have loved to have had a dad, but one thing I learned from my father was to avoid addictions. And it was a hard lesson, but anyway, my mom lived to be 98, and she was totally amazing. She would get me ready for school. She would drive 8 miles to a one-room school. She would, in the winter, get a wood and coal fire started and teach 35 children in grades 1 through 8. And I never heard my mom complain once. And I was with my mom her last year of life. It's when I left my marriage of 37 years. And so I went out to the camp in near 30 miles east of Cleveland, and I was a caretaker for the camp, and I called my mom. She had lived by herself till she was 97, and then she went into a nursing home and despised it, which I would too. And I called my mom and I said, "Mom, would you like to come out and live with me?" And she said she would. So I drove to Curwensville, which is about 3 hours away, and picked her up, took her back to camp. And then one night I couldn't sleep, and that's very unusual for me. And if I can't sleep, I warm up milk and drink hot milk. It puts me to sleep like that. So 1:30 in the morning, and my mom and I were in the same room, I was going out to the kitchen to warm up some milk, and my mom woke up. And she had these beautiful hazel eyes, and she looked at me and said, "Richard, I've got it all figured out." I almost had to laugh. 1:30 in the morning, my mom's 98, and she's telling me she has it all figured. It was like a moment of revelation, you know. And I said, "Is that right, Mom?" And she looked at me and said, "Yes, just plan to be happy. No matter what, just plan to be happy." And then she fell asleep.